For the next hour, we will spend time with Tory Dietel Hopps, class of 1981. Tori and her family have a wonderful history with Emma Willard School, dating back to 1944 when her mom, Linda, came to Mount Ida as a student, and then again in 1960 when her parents returned to Mount Ida with her dad, Bill, at the helm of the school as principal. Tori currently resides in Maine with her husband, Jonathan. For the first 25 years of her career, Tori worked in the nonprofit field in education, environment, and health and human services. In 2007, she joined her dad, Bill, to launch Dietel & Partners, a shared family philanthropic office. Tori works with individuals and families with both domestic and international philanthropic interests to develop strategies and customize ways to engage clients to bring about positive social change. Tori is a social justice, environmental, and financial activist. When not causing good trouble, you will likely find her gardening, hiking, dancing, or visiting with her 2 adult children. Tori is one of the women leading the way using her money to shape a better world. Please welcome Tori as she shares her journey of aligning her money with her values. Over to you, Tori.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Can you hear me okay? Good.
You sound great.
Thank you to Margaret and Navarre and to Emma for inviting me to speak today. I'm very excited to let you know that this is a little bit like the giveaway at the beginning. The first 40 people who signed up today are going to be receiving a free link to a copy of a book entitled The Clean Money Revolution, which was written by Joel Solomon, who has been a mentor of mine. It is one of 3 books that I have absolutely loved through my adventure of trying to figure out aligning my money with my values. So I'm excited about that. I want to thank my sister, Ren, who is both my older sister and business partner. She's going to be running the slides today. And Margaret will be sending out the slide deck from today's presentation along with the recording from today. So if you are a intense note taker like me, you can relax. You're going to get the slides, which will also include a listing at the end of a bunch of resources that I will mention throughout my talk. I want to preface everything I say today by saying that I am not a registered financial advisor. I am speaking to you today as an individual investor and telling my story of the last decade of my life of trying to figure out money and what that means to me and how it represents me in the world. So I'm going to do a presentation. It'll be about a half an hour, and then we'll take questions at the end. If you have questions while I'm speaking, you can feel free to put them in the chat, and Margaret will keep track of that. So I want to start by saying that I am extremely conscious that this is a conversation that is based in white privilege. It's something that I've been grappling with and thinking deeply about. I have a few goals for today. I aim to be vulnerable, and I'm going to share what often feels like a conversation that polite people don't have. You don't talk about money. I'm going to tell my truth, and I'm going to tell the process that I have gone through so that my money reflects my values and my ideals. I'm going to point out some of the many money myths that get in the way of how we deal with our money. They certainly were myths that blocked me. And I think they're especially potent for women. I also want to inspire you, no matter whether you have a little bit of money or whether you have a whole lot of money. I want to inspire you to do something after today's conversation to align your money with your values. I also invite you to become part of a community. There's no one who needs to be alone in this work. So, since we're going to talk a lot about values, I wanted to start by talking a bit about the things that have influenced me in my life, because you will begin to see some patterns here. As many of you know, I was born on campus of the oldest girls' school in the country. And at Emma Willard, and throughout my life, I have been influenced by strong women like my mom and the men who supported them like my dad. When we left Emma Willard at age 7, for me, we spent the next 10 years on a farm, and I got connected to the agricultural world. I have a lifelong connection to the Adirondack Park in northern New York State, and that truly has been my connection to the natural world and was the start of my environmentalism. My maternal great-grandfather, Edmund Lyon, was a wealth creator in our family. He was an inventor and he was an investor. He was a philanthropist and a humanitarian. Because of my parents and because of my profession, I've been exposed to many cultures and I've traveled around the world quite a bit. That has given me an appreciation for diversity and for a global view. I had parents who talked a lot about their values. They were incredibly transparent about their money. And for the last 20 years, my 4 siblings and I have gathered with my parents on an annual basis to talk about our lives, our joys, our challenges, our investments, and our philanthropy. I married a fabulous man who did not come from money, but he came into our relationship with a very strong set of social values. By faith, I am a Unitarian Universalist, and so the interconnected web of life is deeply important to me. And lastly, as Margaret said, I spent 25 years in the nonprofit sector, managing nonprofits, followed by 13 years as an advisor with Dietel and Partners. And I'm proud to say we are now a certified women-owned company. Through my professional career, I've had exposure to social innovation, social change leaders, and to systems thinking. So how did money show up in my life? We're talking about money, right? Well, I had jobs in high school and college to earn spending money. When I turned 21, I inherited a chunk of money. It was not enough to live on permanently, but enough to give me many choices and opportunities. My husband and I work full time. We both earn an income and we both have retirement accounts. We are homeowners. And recently, I'm sorry to say, I inherited another chunk of money from my mother's estate. So I mentioned earlier these myths. And I want to talk a little bit about the emotional side of money. So for me, when I was younger, money was confusing, it was a little emotionally loaded, and in many ways, it was a bit of a black box. I didn't really understand the language of high finance. And in most instances, when I was meeting with advisors, accountants, or bankers, I felt like a fish out of water. This was a male-dominated field, and I didn't feel particularly comfortable there. So these myths, these money myths, what are they? Well, here are the ones that I bought into. Number 1, your success as an investor is reflected in the returns that you make. The higher return, the smarter you are. Number 2, mutual funds and index funds are an easy solution. Number 3, let the professionals do their job. That's what you pay them for. Number 4, we're breaking it right now. Don't talk about money with others. Don't share information. 5, avoid paying investment fees like the plague. You should go with investments that have the lowest fees. It's stupid to pay fees. 6, you shouldn't settle for concessionary rates. And the last myth I bought into was that you use charitable money to do good in the world. Investments are a wholly other domain. So with all these myths at work, it's no wonder that my husband and I felt like this when we went to meet with our family financial advisor. Some of you may have had that feeling. So when we went and had conversations with the investment advisor, it was mostly focused on our risk tolerance. And it would go something like this. How much risk can you tolerate? Would you like to be 40% in bonds and 60% in equities? How much cash do you need in liquid assets? Let's put that in a money market for you. I was never once, and I'm 57 today, I was never once asked about what my values were or what were the things that I cared about. I realize now that I was giving up my own power in those conversations. And I honestly left most of those meetings feeling like this New Yorker cartoon. So along my journey, I had an aha moment, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But before that, professionally for me, I was in a sector that was focused on the importance of moving big chunks of philanthropic assets into mission alignment. I didn't think you could do much unless you had tens of millions of dollars, and that honestly allowed me to avoid looking in the mirror. I paid attention to my clients because their wealth was so much greater than my own, until one day I did have a profound awakening. My aha moment came in 2013. I was on a site visit in Myanmar, the former country of Burma. I was with a amazing environmental and humanitarian activist who founded and runs something called Earth Rights International. Kasawa is his name, and he is a member of the Karen people, one of Burma's indigenous ethnic minority groups. We were eyewitness to an incredible devastation of land and livelihoods and people, as multinational corporations were grabbing and literally wiping people off of the land for their own development. We sat in their homes. We heard the machines. We watched as there were horrible things happening. Here in front of me was extraction in capital letters. And I immediately had a thought. Do I own any of these companies in my portfolio? I suddenly had an interest in what was in my portfolio as opposed to what my returns were. As I came home from that trip, incredibly shaken, I promised myself that I would put attention to what my money was actually doing in the world in my name. So I want to share some goals with you. At this point, I was not interested in losing money. I also wasn't seeking to amass a fortune. There are different kinds of returns out there. There are emotional returns, there are spiritual returns, there are financial returns. I was after all of them. I was beginning to understand that deploying capital could be both interesting, but could also nourish my soul. I was not interested in causing harm to the planet or to other human beings. And I ground myself in lessons from the natural world, one of which is that old growth forests grow at 3.5% a year. That is sustainable over time. So many people, as they start the process that I was in, they start with the question of what is enough? And I came at this with the question, can I sleep at night knowing what my money is doing? Over the years, I've been influenced by a number of entities, and I'm going to give you links to all these. I was deeply influenced by an entity called Confluence Philanthropy. It's a membership organization of foundations, wealthy individuals, and their advisors. And their tagline is own what you own. And I decided to make that my personal tagline. I realized that my money was in fact an extension of me and a representation of me as a resident on our planet and as a member of society, and that I needed to pay more attention. I felt originally that my inherited money was very precious. I hadn't earned it. It wasn't really mine. And so I didn't want to mess with that. So I decided I would start all of this with my retirement account. That was my money. I earned it, and I could make those decisions. I did not have a formal process when I started this. I didn't talk to people about this. I just knew I needed to start taking small steps. My husband, Jonathan, was initially supportive of my commitment, but he was not ready to change his retirement investments. This was my thing. And I share that with you because if you are in a relationship, sometimes we're not always starting from the same page. Don't let that stop you. So when I woke up to all of this, thinking about my money out there swirling in the world, I found it pretty overwhelming to think about the different ways my money was working, and it was working 24/7 and likely doing things I wouldn't want my name attached to. It's a lot easier to put your head in the sand. But as the fabulous, notorious RBG says, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. So what I was clear about was that as an activist, I knew the things that I cared deeply about. My values are in my bones. No one knows those better than me. I care about racial and gender equity. I care about environmental protection. I care about addressing climate change. I care about local economies and agriculture. And I really care about addressing the wealth gap in our country. So through my research, as I started out, I learned that nearly all of the big banks finance the fossil fuel industry. And worse, they finance its expansion. The slide you're seeing here is taken from a report called Banking on Climate Change. So suddenly, my husband and I had our first agreement. We both did not want our money being used this way. And we were at one of these big banks for our bank account, and our credit cards were underwritten by these banks. So we agreed that the first thing we would do would be to change our credit cards to credit card companies that were not underwritten by these banks. So Amalgamated Bank was the first bank to sign the Divest Invest pledge, and Green America is a cooperative. We liked both of those and moved our credit cards there. We then left our big bank and came to a local credit union. We did that because we know that our money, when it's in our checking and savings account and is being circulated and used for loans, it's going into our community. Lastly, we started shifting investments in our retirement accounts, in my retirement account. So I marched right into my family investment advisor and I announced my newfound religion. I was heading in another direction. I mostly felt belittled and not supported. Often the plight of people who are trying to do values or impact investing in a traditional investment firm. And this is particularly true for women. So I was out looking around and I placed my first social investment with RSF Social Finance Fund, and I started getting their newsletter. And it introduced me to this entire new language and to companions in this space. And suddenly I realized there were other people who were thinking this way. So I wasn't deterred. I was interested in the notion that my money could both advance issues that I cared about, and it could also be used to help build the wealth of others. I became very intrigued in employee-owned models and in cooperative ownership models. Slowly, over 5 years, without the support of my family investment advisor, I moved all of my retirement funds into assets that I felt very good about. But still at this point, I really didn't have a game plan. It was during this period that I was activating my account that my husband and I agreed on another major investment. And I share this. We agreed to convert our home to solar power. And I share that because investments come in many forms, as do dividends. So in essence, I'd been operating for a long time in my comfort zone, and I realized that I needed to get over where that magic happens. But in order to do that, I had to build my muscle, and I had to build my confidence and find some learning communities. So off I went. I found an entity called Next Wave Fund. It's a group of global women investors working to increase diversity, inclusion, and impact in early stage companies. They're a progressive learn by doing model, and I joined them. I began to get engaged with something called Slow Money Maine. It's a network that focuses on local farms and fisheries and the ecosystem that helps them. I applied for and became an RSF Social Finance Fellow, and I went and attended the Integrated Capital Institute, where I learned about diverse forms of social and financial capital to address complex problems. I officially became a financial activist at the end of that fellowship, and I decided to go public, and I've signed the Invest for Better pledge, a movement of women who are committing to investing in meaningful ways. I started attending something called the Northern New England Women Investors Network. I participated in the first workshop of a book called Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva. That was where I really connected with the concepts of indigenous wisdom and the decolonization of money. It opened my eyes to redefining what profit really means to me. I moved from how do I profit to how do we profit. I made a pledge at that workshop because Edgar holds your feet to the fire. And I made a pledge to find a new investment advisor. The day had come. One who did not think my ideas were crazy, and one who at the very least thought my ideas were worthy of a conversation. I was looking for both a guide and a learning partner. So as I continued this process, I would share things with my husband along the way. And eventually over time, he saw what I was doing. And when I could show him and our family investment advisor that my retirement account was earning just a bit under 0.5% less than his returns, which were very traditionally and, shall I say, extractively invested, my husband decided he too would join me in aligning his money with his values. So we headed into research mode together to find an advisor we felt good about. Now, it's still early days in this field. In fact, the term impact investing was developed about a decade ago. So finding an advisor for someone who didn't have tens of millions of dollars took some determination, time, and research. There are many more options out there for people with more money. I couldn't hit the minimum benchmarks of $3 or $5 million for many of the advisory firms. Efforts do exist, and I'm happy to say that there is a new guide that will be coming out called the Values Advisor Guide that will help people to find people to help you do what I'm doing. So I officially broke with my family advisor, and I've chosen to work with Bill Stoddard at North Fork Capital, based out of Bozeman, Montana. The first thing that Bill encouraged us to do was to write an investment statement that would guide our work together. And I'll read this to you. This is the preamble to our statement. We have both earned and inherited money. We believe the money, in any form it came to us, represents who we are, our values, and to that end, we seek to reflect those values in our investment decisions. We're not interested in extraction or supporting the cause of harmful externalities to land or people for the sake of making higher returns. We seek to align what is in our name with who we are morally, consciously, and politically. While we seek returns from our investments, we also seek opportunities to help create wealth for others and provide on-ramps and access to money for building businesses, particularly, but not exclusively, for those who have not had access or opportunity to do so. BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color populations, and women in particular. We're interested in placing our money where our mouth is and to seek creative ways to let our money work towards a better world and increase the sense of joy we get from determining how to invest our resources. Now, I'll share with you that we had developed some basic goals. We wanted adequate income to support the charitable giving that we wanted to do while we were alive. We know we have to prepare for our retirement down the road, and that we have some personal pursuits we would like to go after as we age. We wanted to steward our resources in a prudent manner, consistent with sound business practices. And we wanted to generate not just positive financial outcomes, but also outcomes consistent with supporting the following: justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, climate change mitigation, sound management of air, land, and water, affordable housing, renewable energy and innovations in sustainability, regenerative and local agriculture, women's rights, women's leadership, and products designed for and by women. So we had to figure out a whole new format for how we were going to think about this. And we decided it made sense to think of our money in 4 different buckets. So the first bucket is the ultimate bucket. And I'm going to explain what each of these are, and then I'm going to walk through the buckets and give you some real examples of what that looks like from an investment standpoint. So the ultimate bucket addresses our desire to help others build wealth through employee ownership and cooperatively owned entities, care for the planet, change externalities to positives, and hit on almost all of our values. So along the side here on the left, you're going to see that there are different types of assets, and not every line is going to be populated because we're still working at this. Up under cash, so we keep a cash on hand, and we decided that we wanted to put our cash to work. That needed to be working for the things we cared about, and we found something called Maine Harvest, which is the only fully regulated financial institution. It focuses on growing a healthy food system through government guaranteed deposits. So Maine Harvest provides financing for small farms and food producers throughout the state of Maine from their deposits. Now, an average savings account will pay you 0.5%. With the regular savings at Maine Harvest, we earn 0.2, and with a 5-year certificate, we earn 0.8. Under the private debt, I was quite interested in finding entities that speak to this building of wealth for others. And Tootie's Tempeh is a company that was started by 2 women in Maine. It is a worker-owned cooperative. They make a vegetarian protein product, and they are innovating on the first ever recyclable plant-based film as opposed to plastic. We put a debt investment with them, and that pays us 6%. Namaste Solar is an employee-owned public benefit corporation that installs residential and commercial solar. They also spun off a purchasing cooperative for the entire field of installers around the country, bringing prices down. Again, we earn a 6.5% from them. AHP Servicing primarily purchases home loans that have fallen behind in payment, yet they believe they have the potential to be restructured or settled and to keep people in their homes. They have a return of 8 to 10%. Down under the private dividend-paying equities, there's Kachwa Fund. This is an investment cooperative and a public benefit corp. It's focused on owning and operating impact real estate and investing in privately held impact companies. In essence, it's a combination of a real estate investment trust and a mutual fund, and it pays 5%. NIA Capital Impact was designed to bring impact investing to the public markets. This portfolio invests at the intersection of social justice and environmental sustainability. It uses a gender lens and is committed to racial equity throughout its investments. It has done very well. Pax Elevate is the first broadly diversified mutual fund that invests in the highest rated companies in the world for advancing women through diverse boards, senior leadership teams, and other policies and practices. Change Finance invests in companies that invest in clean tech, take the health and well-being of their stakeholders seriously, and puts women in positions of leadership. And lastly, Trillium ESG global funds meet a dual mandate of environmental leadership and financial quality, and they are extremely active in shareholder activism, which is important to me. The next bucket is the try to do no harm bucket. And this bucket we use when we can't have full forward 110% values alignment with a desired return, but we at the very least can do no harm to people or planet and try to increase access to traditionally underfinanced areas. So in this bucket, we've got the Domini Impact Bond. This seeks impact across a range of social environmental issues affecting communities that include affordable housing, accessible healthcare, economic development, and transition to a low carbon future. Pax Impacts, here it says Impacts Asset Management. Pax Global Environmental Market is the fund we own there. That's got a global thematic strategy of investing in companies that are developing solutions around energy, water, resource recovery affecting sustainable food, ag, and forests. The last 3 companies down on the bottom came out of an effort. I told you earlier that I had been part of something called Next Wave Fund. And the women who run that fund decided that it was time to do a focus on entrepreneurs of color. And so we worked to showcase a series of entrepreneurs of color, and I chose to invest in 3 of those entrepreneurs. Flick Shop is a company that connects with incarcerated populations, and they have a mission to reduce recidivism. Ag Tools addresses the gap in information between farmers and markets. They improve farm income and reduce waste. And Block Power is an energy technology company that's helping to green cities through clean energy projects in buildings. So that's the second bucket. The third bucket is the feels right bucket, which people sometimes kind of want to giggle when I say that. But for us, this is the bucket where things went where they made moral sense for us to invest in. They were an incredible learning opportunity, but we maybe didn't have the rate of return we completely wanted, or we weren't sure what the rate of return was, but we felt that it was important for our total portfolio to be engaged. So here is where I have RSF Social Finance Fund. This invests in social enterprises working in food and ag, arts, education, climate, and the environment. I am deeply morally committed to the fund. I've had huge learning through RSF, and this fund pays 0.5% return. The Crown of Maine is also an organic cooperative. It distributes locally grown produce all across the state of Maine, where I am a resident. Felt like this was a major missing link in our local food system. And so I wanted to be supportive of the distribution system. Not sure what the return will be on this. Then lastly, we have the not sure yet bucket. So the not sure yet bucket is companies that we had in our investment portfolio that we're not convinced their practices are in values alignment with us. Give you some examples. Tesla. I love what Tesla has done for the electric car market, what they've done for the electric car infrastructure in our country, but I'm not crazy about their employee practices. They are on the question mark. MSCI is something I honestly still need to dig deeper into. I'm not sure this is a total fit for us. Nexi is an innovative and sustainable whole building solution company. They enable rapid assembly of high quality, climate resilient buildings. They create a safer work environment, dramatically reduces the impact of existing building practices. I love what they do. They are incredibly forward looking. They are very pale and male in their leadership, management, and board. I have taken an equity stance with them, and I'm working to try and bring women and people of color to the table. So, as of now, 9% of our total holdings are in investments that are off of Wall Street. I expect that to grow, and I'm hoping to get up to close to 20%. That's my target. So what's next for me? I'm going to do deeper work with our new advisor to move all of our inherited money and my husband's retirement towards greater alignment. It took me 7 years to complete all the work in my retirement account, and I anticipate this will take us another 3 to 5 years. Doesn't happen overnight. I have joined something called Tonic, which is an impact investing community where I can learn and share ideas and deal flow with other like-minded investors. I've worked with my children and will continue to encourage them to think about values and money. I want to continue building a community of people who want to move money in healing, restorative, and liberational ways, and to be an ally to anyone, whether you are about to take the first step or further down the trail. So before we aligned our investments with our money, when we looked at our investments, it kind of reminded me of the sculpture. It didn't look like much. It was a bunch of random things. It wasn't that pretty to look at. It really didn't make a lot of sense. And quite frankly, it didn't capture my imagination. Now that we have done the alignment process, We see things from a different perspective. This is the same piece of sculpture, by the way. We feel it makes a strong, coherent statement that reflects what's important to us. Our money is much more interesting and is much more fascinating to look at when we get our reports. So in essence, I'm telling you, I went from feeling like this at the beginning of my discussions with my original investment advisor to feeling like this now that I'm aligning my money with my values. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to take questions.